Alrighty, I've got one half of the Pirate Ninja done. Basically one half of the centerline timbers. I now have to close up the centerboard case. As I said earlier, I can't actually get to this centerboard case when it's completely closed, so I have to do it in two halves, and I have to protect the inside of the centerboard case before I close it up. The last attempt at resin infusion, where I was going to employ vacuum to pull the epoxy through the reinforcement, the carbon fibre and the Kevlar, it didn't work the way I intended it to. Mainly because it is quite a tricky process to do, and also because, because it's really the first time I've attempted it, and so, you know, you're going to have mistakes, and yeah, I got that. So I had to do it old school. Just basically, I've laid down the material the way I showed you earlier. Mix up the epoxy, pour it on, and make sure that it goes through all the reinforcing and sticks to the timber. It actually came out pretty good, actually very good. I was yeah, happy with the way it turned out. I will show you some pictures, and now we're on to the closing half. I've done a few different things to hopefully make my chances of doing this resin infusion gig a little bit better. So I'm really hoping it's going to work properly this time around, but we shall see. Wish me luck again. Learned a few things, and we'll act on those things that I've learned. Also went over some more YouTube videos, especially from Easy Composites, which is where I get all my gear from. And yeah, so what I'll do is I will start cutting the reinforcement out and start setting everything up, and talk through the issues I had, and also the way I've mitigated the issues on this side. Okay, let's get to it. The problems I had with the last one, as I said earlier, was the fact that it wasn't airtight. I needed a bit of space below the centerline timbers to put vacuum bagging tape and all of those kinds of things. And so what I have done is I've got some blue acrylic. There's going to be about 4 or 5 pieces on this, with a line that I've with it cut to shape. You can see me just scribing a line with offset with a piece of plywood and a Sharpie marker. I did that with all the pieces, and then I took it to the bandsaw to get it cut out. And I'm marking where the pieces go in relation to the centerboard timbers, and you'll see me in a moment start struggling with a bandsaw blade. So here we are with the bandsaw. I've got a resawing blade on my bandsaw, and they don't cut curves all that well, but it's the only blade I've got, and I have to look at getting a smaller blade. But you know, it happens. It happens. So I fashioned this flange out of acrylic, and there were about 5 pieces all overlapped in a sort of brickwork area to make sure that things were going to be fairly airtight. When I glued these things, you'll see the acrylic at a later stage. When I glued these things down, I used some silicone bathroom sealant, and it sort of did the job, but I reckon it was pretty much the only thing that that could actually do the job the way I wanted it to do. There's not sort of any kind of vacuum bagging material. So here I am. I've got all my 5 pieces cut. I'm setting up this this first piece. They're all pretty much rinse and repeat. And then what I did is seal the end grain with epoxy and sealed all of the parts with bathroom sealant. So now what I'm doing is cleaning the surface ready for epoxying, and you can see me put down this this vacuum bagging, sort of like mastic tape, and it's really been designed for applying to very smooth plasticky kind of tooling and not plywood, I think. And so what happens is that I think some of the air got under the rough surface of the plywood, but really my main issue, I think, is the fact that I'm not all that skilled, and I'm just waxing down the gap in the centerline timbers there that doesn't have plywood reinforcing, doesn't have plywood. Now what I'm doing is I'm just measuring up and cutting the plywood, excuse me, the reinforcement, the carbon fibre and Kevlar. Now I wanted to make this whole assembly as airtight as possible. So what I did was, the last one I actually cut the inspection hatch hole before I laid the reinforcing and did all the epoxying. This time around I thought, well, instead of trying to seal up a big hole, I just won't have a hole there to seal up. And so what I did was marked out roughly where the hole was, cut the reinforcing around it, Now I'm getting to the point where I have to add the consumables to this vacuum bagging stack so the resin can actually flow through the stack properly. This yellow stuff is the peel ply and breather fabric. That'll allow the resin to actually move through the system. And now what I'm doing is measuring up and setting up the vacuum line. This is where I pull the air out, and this blue stuff doesn't allow resin to actually move through it, so I put more resin on the material as opposed to in my catch pot. So once I've done that, I need to find out how much resin I need, and it's the same amount of resin as the mass of the reinforcing, so I'm measuring that out, and then I'm going to also doing final trims to make sure that everything sits properly and does those kinds of things. And then I'll just assemble the stack. So I've got the reinforcement, the second layer of reinforcement, sorry, third layer, because I've already put the carbon fibre down, and finally the peel ply and breather, and the resin, the vacuum line, and now you see me set up this resin line. So this is where the resin is going to go into the system and allow the resin to actually move through the system. Inlet is closest to you, the blue thing is the outlet, and now what I'm doing is the trickiest part of it, which is putting an actual bag onto the system. And this is where I think I'm running into where my skills are not as best. I try as good as I could, but this was kind of tricky to make sure that the bag was able to move, like able to not stretch, and also be airtight. I got it reasonably well, but there were still some issues. But you know, you live and you learn, I'm sure. Alrighty, you've seen me lay out the carbon fibre, the Kevlar. You've seen me cut this stuff, which is the peel ply and breather fabric, which will allow air and then epoxy to actually breathe through the whole assembly. And then we have this stuff here, which is the airtight bag. Well, bag for want of a better word, because it doesn't actually bag over the whole entire thing, but semantics. Let's just talk about a few of these tubes and things. First up, we need a way to get the resin inside the part, and this thing normally will stand up when I pull a vacuum on, but it's being recalcitrant, which is yeah, it happens. These two lines here that goes to the end, that will draw the resin in and then through the system. These lines here, these two lines here, pulls the air out and then will pull the resin through the system. Any extra resin will be caught in this catch pot here. Now, it isn't 100% airtight, which is kind of, well, it's not the best practice. The best practice is to be 100% airtight and then it stays that way. But I fear the reason why it isn't that is because of the end grain of, well, a good craftsman never blames his tools, and well, I don't confess to be a good craftsman. The issue I feel I have is, one, this is a fairly complex setup and I haven't been able to get it completely airtight for, well, reasons. The other issue I have is I don't think this method really lends itself to pulling a vacuum against timber as a substrate, because timber is porous. So we don't have a full vacuum. I think it will do what I want it to do, but it's not best practice. So those of you at Easy Composites who run across this video, please accept my apologies. I'm trying my best. Okay, so I'm just going to pull a vacuum and we'll see what these lines do. You see, it stays up when there's force applied to it. At the moment, what we have is we have a stack of, well, we have almost an atmosphere of force pressing down on this material. It is also sucking air, some air, out of the timber. So I'm hoping that the flowy resin will actually be pulled through the material and into the timber, making a really solid, tight joint. So my next job is to mix up some resin. I'm going to boil it, degas it, and then we'll pull it through the infusion. So that's where we're at. Okay, I've managed to get most of the air out of my epoxy, and I'm now ready to, well, I pulled the vacuum up to the vacuum chamber. I'm going to open my airline. Now I've got a decent vacuum on my airline, and now it's on. Now what I need to do is, now I'm going to put a pair of gloves on and release the shmoo. This is sort of the, whoop, that's a dud glove. It's sort of the coolest thing. You spend a long time trying to get it all ready, and you get it ready well enough, and now here we go. Gloves, stick, all right. Let's let her rip. Come on. I'm really hoping I haven't tried to degas this thing as often for too long and the epoxy's starting to cure in the pot. That would be annoying. Up there we go. See the epoxy coming out there, coming out there. This is the great bit about it. You can see the epoxy flowing through the tube going and into the system in the bottom left hand corner and travelling towards that blue tape, which was where I pulled the vacuum out. And here's a wider shot seeing how the darker yellow shade is where the epoxies have flowed through. And there's a little bit of fiddling around to make sure that the whole areas get completely covered. But it is quite exciting and also a little bit stressful because there's no going back from this at this time. Now, the yellow peel ply that I discussed and also that blue tape that allows the air to flow through but not liquids to flow through. If I didn't have that there, the epoxy would have great difficulty just flowing through the reinforcing material and into the plywood. So I have to have that so it allows the epoxy to actually move through the entire system. And that's why it's there. The blue tape just applies the vacuum more to the entire setup, so that's why it's there. Now the peel ply, I need that when I actually remove the vacuum bag and all of this associated plumbing. That's the only reason why it's there, and it gives a nice gives a pretty good finish for what I do next time. After about 24 hours of curing, it was time to unwrap it and see how I went. I was looking forward to this bit, and it seemed to have gone okay. But yeah, it was still quite daunting. So here I am removing the plastic and then the peel ply. As I said, if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't have this kind of finish that I had. I was really pleased with the way it turned out. Alrighty, I am super stoked at how this turned out. There's only two issues, or three if you count this corner here, that didn't actually infuse. There's a bit going on here, but it's on the whole it worked out beautifully. Really happy. This wasn't the best practice for vacuum assisted resin infusion, mainly because there were a lot of air leaks, there were a lot of issues, but you know, the whole thing worked except for a few little voids that for some reason didn't work. But the only way I can describe it as is very, very pleased with the way it turned out, even with my lack of skills and a rather tricky setup. So I'm going to now get everything cleaned up and ready to go, ready for the next thing. I have to fix the floors in it. I have to put some more epoxy over the whole thing, but it's nice and flat and strong and yeah, 4 kinds of awesome. So very happy with it. Okay, so